So pleased to have you join us once again for Curiosity, Not Judgment. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So we've been thinking about all of the years of doing this podcast, and I think we are on episode 150 something. And if math serves me correctly, that means we are quickly approaching 3 years, or have crossed that 3-year mark, depending on taking some weeks off here and there. But so for 3 years, we've been curious. We've been asking questions. We've been doing our best to frame the experiences that we have in a curious nature and a curious posture. But what happens if after all that time and effort, your circumstances don't change, the people around you don't follow suit, or your choice to be curious doesn't seem to be paying off? Then what?
It's a good, curious question. And I think that's a very interesting perspective and an interesting question. I would find it very hard to believe that there would be no change. If you did a change, I think we have a ripple effect around us. Sometimes we don't see it right away, but I think we have a ripple effect around us on all of our relationships when we change, when we do things differently. And so I think that you'd probably see some. Now, what your question might be is, it doesn't seem to be having an impact on the people that I want to impact, or that
Perhaps, yeah.
or that need to change. I always love it when you're talking to an audience and they say, "Oh, this is great stuff. I wish my wife was here, or I wish my coworker was here. They're the one that need this." It's like, well, the change that you want to see in the world begins with you. And so I would say that if you're really practicing something new, you are having an effect on people. Many times we don't know that. We hear stories about people who say, "Wow, that thing that you said such and such time ago really impacted me." And it's like, really? I don't even remember saying it, or I don't remember that interaction. But I would say that you probably are having an impact. But the bigger principle at play here, I think, is the do it anyway principle, which is, as Mother Teresa said in that famous poem, "Do It Anyway," is that we should be doing the right thing by our own perceptions, whether or not we think it's going to have a desired effect or outcome in our behalf or on other people's behalf.
Yeah. That's a tricky one, though, right? Because it is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak, about what the right thing is or what the good thing is. But I would hope there's some minimal universal standard that maybe we can agree on upon what a good thing is to do. But I know in the case of Mother Teresa, she is known for helping the poor. She's all about elevating somebody from a position of poverty to the next step out, whatever that looks like.
She certainly has the credibility of good motivations, right? And I think most people would agree on that. And so I think those words are really good. I looked up the poem just before we started, and it's called "Do It Anyway." People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway, right? If you are honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best you have, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. And in the final analysis, it is between you and God. It is never between you and them anyway. So I really like that. I think that, doing things anyway, even if it doesn't appear to be having the desired effect in the moment, do it anyway. Just because, again, it's the right thing to do is a funny phrase these days because people disagree on what's right. But I often think of what's the next indicated thing to do. I have these voices in my head that are always telling me, do this, do this, do this, do this. I listen to the one that seems to be the least selfish, the least self-centered, and the one that helps others, and where others are helped. The more I focus on others and what's good for them, it seems to be the best. So I think if you use that as a simple, maybe ignorant
Temperature
test,
yeah.
then it's a good way to go.
Yeah. Well, so then can we add to the list of statements, being curious may not produce immediate results or may not produce what you expect it to, but be curious anyway?
Be curious anyway, because it beats judgment. Curiosity enables growth, and judgment just stops it. I mean, at least in my experience, I'll speak for me, but that if I've judged something, then I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
If I stay curious, then I have an opportunity to learn more about the subject or about the person, and I mean that innately seems good to me.
Yeah. I this week am having to go through hours and hours and hours of training. I'm part of my salary, a large part of my salary is a grant fund mechanism. And so I have to do all these compliance trainings. And so you're right. I get to do all these compliance trainings, topics like elder abuse and sexual violence, and the list goes on and on and on. And so they're hard trainings to sit and just absorb this material over and over and over again, and for all these different subject matters. But as I was listening to it, data has changed the way that we do things. Data has changed the way that we form laws. Data has changed the way that we view victims versus perpetrators. And a lot of that really had to come through a curious posture, because if we, as a society, continue to think in a very rigid way that the way that we've always done it is the way that should always be done, we are oftentimes missing some really important elements to a situation. And I know I've shared in the past, I work for an organization that we help survivors of human trafficking, but it's the difference between the mentality around prostitution of the, 50s and 60s versus human trafficking victims of the 2000s and beyond. Because where a police officer might have looked at somebody on the street who was engaged in sex for sale, would view them as a prostitute, it was an arrestable offense, that individual would be taken to jail and charged, versus now, chances are very high that that individual did not set out after high school and say, what I really want to be when I grow up is a prostitute.
Right.
That there was really a series of situations that led her to this moment where she very well may be a victim of trafficking. And so being curious in all these different arenas, everything from social services to law enforcement to, how we operate in society as a whole, curiosity has had to pave the way for us to think differently.
Yeah, and I think that and data, you're right, that data and or awareness and or learning and growth about a certain subject are all good ways of saying that, because I think that and again, that's a really good example of curiosity, not judgment, by the way. You can certainly judge somebody who's doing something, but you don't know the backstory. Right. You don't know the whole thing about how they got there.
Right.
My wife and I are watching this series called Anne with an E.
Oh, yeah.
It's based on a book, apparently, that's really good. Anne of Green Gables, that's right. And people are constantly judging her. Mm-hmm. And you say the word orphan, especially back then, oh my goodness, it had these amazing connotations.
Very negative ones.
Very negative ones that I think we've evolved from. But, and various parts during the show, people look at her and realize, she's been through a lot. Mm-hmm. And she didn't have a choice in any of that. Yeah. And look at how well she's doing despite that. Mm. And she has some anger issues and some things that have happened because of traumas from the past, which we've talked about. But it's curious to me how people look at certain people in certain situations and immediately pass judgment, versus thinking about, well, okay, that person is in this certain situation now. What's their life trajectory? Where are they going? Do they have hopes and dreams? Maybe they're stuck. Maybe they're on the way down. Who knows? But I think it's worth a little bit of time and curiosity, before we just judge someone and put them in a box and, that's it.
Yeah. But I think back to the original question about what happens when you're curious and it seems to not pay off, or people don't seem to change. I can tell you, in the case with individuals who are victims of domestic violence, statistically, it's times 7 or later that they will finally leave their abuser. And so if you're the person on the curious side saying, why don't they leave? And, my curiosity has been unfounded or unwarranted in that, like, I've tried to believe the best. I tried to put myself in their shoes. I tried to whatever, and it's just going on and on and on and on. I'm going to make a judgment. It's just a lost cause, right? But statistically, it's not until, violation 7 or intervention rather 7 that person is ready to make the change. And so it takes a long time to be curious and to wait. And I don't want to say this disrespectfully or in a way, I'm not trying to paint a picture that is saying, well, I'm going to, walk away because this person didn't heed my advice. I don't mean it like that. But if you're a loved one watching something happen and you've spoken up and you've, shared your curiosity about, is there a better way to live? Are you okay? Is this situation all right? And, you've been shut down, you've been rejected in that curious posture. Instead of just crossing your arms and shutting down the relationship, maybe to think to yourself as one of your own personal questions, is this a long game? And do I have to stay here? Do I have to stand and be curious and be ready for when the other person finally is able to see something other than the circumstance in which they are living right now?
Absolutely. And I think that, and this is dependent on the scale of, is this a family member or is this my, guy I'm buying a used car from?
Right.
So, but given that scale and that 3-dimensional aspect, if it's family, in my opinion, what choice do you have? You must stay curious if you want to affect change or have a positive influence on someone, because the minute someone feels judged, I think they stop listening, especially to the person that they feel judged by, or the organization that they feel judged by, or the government that they feel judged by, or society that they feel judged by. I think that it's difficult for those folks to come around. If they feel that you're being curious about their circumstances and what led them to it, or curious to help them ask their own curious questions, or asking questions that they then start asking themselves so that they can make their own decision, right? People don't want people to make decisions for them in general,
Right.
although I see some people these days that seem to want other people to make decisions for them. I used to call that dysfunctional. I guess nowadays it's okay. But in general, people like to make their own decisions. So the only way I come to my own decision is if I'm having my own curious thought process to come to a new or different decision. The old adage of, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think most people get that and understand that if I don't like the situation I'm in, I probably need to make a change. What is the least painful change I can make? Or what is the change I need to make? And can I baby step my way there? Or can I just decide, you know what, I'm not going to make that change now. I'm going to continue living the way I am. And a lot of people make that decision. We, especially as family members or people who are truly trying to help that person, we don't have a choice as to when they're going to make that decision to make a change.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, we can't dictate one thing about their choice.
We may be able to influence it.
Right.
Maybe through a trusting relationship, through a curious relationship, through a loving relationship, but we can't make the decision for them.
Yeah. I don't want to necessarily equate apples to apples in this, but I think in this situation where we're talking about a long sequence of events or a long relationship where you have to just kind of remain on the sidelines and hope for kind of an awakening and an epiphany by the other party. In this moment only, I would say I would equate curiosity to almost a softness, just to choose to remain soft. And maybe it's not even curious questions specifically, but it's a willingness to entertain relationship if and when the other person is ready to re-engage. And at that point, you can, re-up your curious questions about, wow, okay, it's been a long time since we've been able to have conversation. How do we re-enter into relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a tough one. And I was thinking about a phrase from a Bible verse this morning where the first half of it says, as much as it depends on you. And I was just thinking about how many different contexts that could apply to. As much as it depends on me, forgive. As much as it depends on me, extend love. As much as it depends on me, extend grace. All of those things that we want to do all those things that I want to do as a human being. But you come to a point where the other party may not reciprocate. The other party may be stuck in judgment. The other person may just be deeply entrenched in their life situation. And so you do come to a moment in time where you've done as much as it depends on you, and now you wait.
Yeah, and Mother Teresa would say, do it anyway. And look, I really appreciate the fact that you shared that it sometimes takes 7, or the average is 7 interventions for someone to change their life when they're in a tough situation like that. That gives me pause. That encourages me not to give up on folks, because and that's data. We started talking about data earlier. If I'm going to make an action, it's good to go get some data, right? So that you don't make a bad action.
Yeah.
I was just this weekend with somebody who has done a very successful development of vacation homes in Port Aransas, Texas. And that person was going to just thought that building anywhere would be a good thing. And their home base is Atlanta, and they were just going to do it, somewhere in that area. And then they went and got some data. And the data was 80% of people at the vacation home want to be on the water. 80% of those people want to be on a beach. And 80% of those people want to be within 3 hours of their current home. So he started drawing some circles and doing some things and came up with this place that had not been developed that met those criteria, and it's wildly successful. And it's like, if he had not gotten that data, he may have done something that did not bear fruit, did not get results. So I think given data, like it takes 7 interventions, that's not the first time I've heard that, 7 interventions. Yeah. I've heard that in a sales process before. I've heard that in a influence to change someone's heart and mind before. I've heard that in other situations. So there may be some magic to that number 7. But the point is, if I have that data, I'm going to behave differently than if I didn't have that data.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. And, to be curious about what does that mean in relation to the person that I'm trying to, win their heart, speak to their heart. And so, if you're on time number 2 or 3, you may be frustrated, you may feel defeated, you may feel like, man, is anything that I'm doing getting through? Is any of the love or the help or the provision that I'm trying to pour into this person making a difference? But maybe you got to wait till time number 7.
Yeah, or, that's
more.
if that's the average.
Yeah.
It could be more. We're all different, and it may be a totally different life circumstance that needs to occur. You talk about years, right? It may be something that years later that seed was planted and comes to fruition, and that person had to live in a tough place for years, but now is out. Yeah. And it's a result of us doing that thing. We're struggling with, is it the right thing, the best indicated thing, the do it anyway with good motivations thing. But it may come to fruition years later, and that's why you do it anyway.
Yeah. And I think too about the proverb about, the generation that plants the tree under whose shade they will never sit. There is something about looking ahead and knowing that your effort may not ever benefit you personally, but that you've got those that are coming behind you that will benefit from your hard work. There's those that will benefit from the heart that you extend of, love, forgiveness, effort, all of those things that will find joy or solace or protection under the shade of that, figurative tree.
As most of you know who've been listening to this for a while, I did a 4-year term in government, and I said that phrase all the time. I am planting seeds for trees under whose shade I will never sit. And I think if you don't have that attitude, I believe that if you have that attitude, you're going to do the right thing more often than if you have the attitude of, I'm only going to do things that are going to benefit me in my current term, or make me look good in my current term. And some people think about legacy and precedent. In the TV show The West Wing, on a recent episode that I was watching, this is 25 years old.
Recent from 25 years ago.
Jed Bartlett, I think is the president's name. Somebody says to him, well, leave that to the next guy. That'll be his problem. And Jed Bartlett says, yeah, and that's why I have to care about it, right? And so I think that, we do have to think about what the legacy of what we're currently doing does. What's the precedent? What's the thing that will have the best impact in this situation with this person at this time?
Yeah. And as I think and reflect on this journey that we've taken over the last 3 years of podcasting, and, we keep striving to write this book, and it's hard. It's hard to find the time. It's hard to find the niche. There's so many books out there in the market. It's easy to get discouraged when you think, there are 17,000 other books around, whatever, but if the notion that this continues to be a really important message still is firmly planted within us, the writing has to happen anyway. We've got to do it anyway.
We need to do it anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a fascinating look at the world. And so I hope, as I always hope with every episode, that as we are talking through these things lifetime, that it kind of puts a different spin maybe on some of the challenges that you have been walking through as our audience, and causes you to think through your own individual circumstances and consider, have I introduced curiosity into this circumstance, and have I been able to shift my perspective just enough that it will benefit myself in the relationships that I have all around me, whether it be family or coworkers or physical neighbors or, internet neighbors, whatever. And so I certainly hope that as we talk about the longevity of a good work or the next good thing or the next right thing, that we are all curious enough to want to do it anyway.
Let's go do it anyway.
Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. As always, appreciate you hanging with us as we talk through these things. If you've got a moment or two and want to rate the podcast, we'd always appreciate a good rating and maybe a comment or two, just so that we can get out there in the world. And of course, you can share it with a friend if you are so inclined. We always appreciate you putting in a good word for us. And we love your comments and your feedback as well. So curiositynotjudgment.com is the website. And of course, any of the platforms that you are listening on, we are delighted if you want to share or comment on those as well. So we'll see y'all next week.
And take care.